This evening we have some music. We've had a number of music events here. This is the latest and maybe the greatest. We'll see. We keep this catalog, right? So Don Dwyer. Don Dwyer is a musician, singer, and songwriter from Buffalo. Don has shared music and stories of the American Civil War with audiences in New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, and Tennessee. Played for many years with the Irish Volunteer Civil War Band at such events as Gettysburg Music Muster, Wyndham Civil War Heritage Gathering, President James Garfield Civil War Weekend, Peterborough Civil War Days, Genesee County Country Museum in Mumford, New York Civil War Weekends. Spit it out. Angelica Civil War Weekend, and many, many more. Don will give some background on the songs, as I understand, that you're singing tonight, to give some idea of the historical context. Besides Civil War, you're also an accomplished Irish musical performer, correct?
Accomplished?
Accomplished.
I don't know.
We're going to go with accomplished. It's a good word. It fits.
I've done it a lot.
All right, and you've been playing different bands for the last 30 years. And before we get to the You're Welcome, I believe this is a contractual obligation. This project is made possible with funds from the Statewide Community Regrant Program, of the New York State Council on the Arts, with support of the Office of the Governor and New York State Legislature, and administrated by our very own Go Art right here in the city of the people. So without further ado, as they say, Mr. Don Dwyer is coming to the stage.
Well, good evening. I always bring this sound system because I never know how big it is, and usually it's not that big for historical things. It's a typical size group, and it works for me. You'll have to tell me if this gets to be too loud. I've been playing Irish music for 30 years and Civil War music for 15. And a good portion of that is with an Irish band that I was with, and then we started doing Civil War reenactments. We did a lot of them, and we really liked them. We one day got a call from this nice lady in Peterborough, New York. It's out near Utica. And she said, I saw your website for our band, and well, we have the biggest Civil War reenactment in the state. Do you think, and then she told me how much it was, and it was a lot. And she said, do you think you could do this music? I said, sure. And so I memorized 30 songs in 3 or 4 months. And we went out and did it. And one of the great things about historical things is the people, they want to like you. You're playing an Irish pub. You have no idea what that evening is going to bring. We often talk about the night that there was a fight at the Buffalo Irish Center. It was quite a Donnybrook. People were throwing each other, there were beers thrown, and there were 4 or 5 guys in it, and we never stopped singing our song. Whiskey in the Jar, I think you were singing. So much nicer at Civil War things. We've sung down at Gettysburg. Anybody here been to Gettysburg? Yeah, it's great. We did it for 5 years, and then we stopped doing it. I'm hopeful of getting back in now as a single, but that's not easy. And it's a blast. So I've been doing this for a very long time. Always a history guy. And I've enjoyed this. And the first song that I'm going to do was really, in the North, this was the most popular song in the North. It was written early in the war. It's called The Battle Cry of Freedom. And The Battle Cry of Freedom was written by George Frederick Root. He was born in 1820 in Massachusetts. And George was a tremendously accomplished musician and composer. He started off in sacred music and in very serious music. His family were all serious musicians. His middle name, Frederick, he was named after Frederick Handel. So they were pretty serious people. He was known on both sides of the Atlantic for the brilliance of his compositions. So after a while, George wanted to pay the bills, and so he got a partner, and they started writing popular songs in the 1850s. Really nothing that I would know anymore, but he made a living at it, and he and his brother and a partner formed a publishing company. And publishing then, like now, is where the money is at. You can, well, for instance, Stephen Foster, you would count sales back then by sheet music. There were no CDs or cassettes. The previous record was 5,000 pieces of sheet music. I don't know the name of the song. But Stephen Foster wrote Oh Susanna, and it sold 700,000 copies. He made $100. Yeah, that was a problem for Stephen. Never made any money. But this guy did. He knew what he was talking about. They formed a publishing company. He made $10,000 on this song alone during the war. It was very popular. If you ever saw the movie Lincoln, 2012, at the end of the movie, when they had just passed the 13th Amendment, this is the song everybody is singing, because everybody would have known it. Of course, in real life, they were probably not singing it in 5-part harmony, like the movie shows, but it was that popular. Now, he was getting to be a little older. He was in his early 40s, so he wasn't going to soldier. So early in 1862, he had written this tune, and there was a big war rally in Washington, and the song was introduced, and the Army had a large presence at this war rally, and the song was gangbusters. The Army grabbed it as their own. It was one of the top marching tunes. There was a tremendous desire for this music. They had the printing houses running 24 hours a day, 16 presses, to keep up with the demand for the sheet music, 700,000 copies, which is an unbelievable amount. When you think, that's still a pretty good amount. Today, with 330 million people, back then you were selling to 24 million. Well, less than that. Yeah, about 24 million people. So it's very impressive. And this is the battle cry for you. Well, we'll rally round the fire, round once again, shouting the battle cry, freedom. To the hillside, gather round the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah boys, hurrah. Down with the traitor and up with the star. We'll rally round the bonny flag, we'll rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Oh, we are springing to the call for 300,000 more, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We'll repel the rebel hordes from the land we love best, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah boys, hurrah. Down with the traitor and up with the star. We'll rally round the bonny flag, we'll gather once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Now we will welcome to our numbers the loyal, true, the brave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Oh, though we may be poor, not one of us a slave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah boys, hurrah. Down with the traitor and up with the star. We'll rally round the bonny flag, we'll gather once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We are springing to the call from the east and from the west, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We repel the rebel hordes from the land we love the best, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah boys, hurrah. riding round the bonny flag of cattle once again, shouting the battle cry of Well, I started off the song with a pretty major frog in my throat. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a long night if this doesn't go away. I'll probably sing right through it now.
There's some hot tea.
Now, this next tune is probably, it's a tune that, believe it or not, like many of these songs, have tremendous legs through history. The name of the tune is Polly Wolly Doodle. Has anybody not heard of Polly Wolly Doodle? And it was written in 1845 by a gentleman named Dan Emmett. Dan Emmett was born in 1815 in Mount Vernon, Ohio. And Dan was a really accomplished person. He's in the American Songwriters Hall of Fame. Very accomplished person. He wrote a lot of great tunes of the era. Old Dan Tucker. He wrote Dixie. And he wrote Dixie. A Northerner wrote Dixie. But people think that vanguard of the South, was written for the Confederacy. It was not. It was written in 1859. It was a massive hit at that time. It really stuck all over the country. But he wrote it because he was in a minstrel group, one of the most accomplished minstrel groups in the United States. And they were playing in New York City, and he got to know the guy who ran the theater. And he said, Dan, we're running a song short in this show. Can you have something else? Well, he sat down and he wrote Dixie, which was a massive hit. He said years later, if I would have known the Confederates the Rebs were going to use that song, I never would have written it. He wasn't too happy. Well, I went down south to see my Sal, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. Oh, my Sal is a feisty gal, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. And very well, my fairy fay. I'm going to Louisiana for to see Louisiana, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. Oh, my Sal, she's a maiden fair, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. With the curly eyes and the laughing hair, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. And very well, my fairy fay. I'm going to Louisiana for to see Louisiana, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. I went to the river and I couldn't get across, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. I got here and I thought I was a horse, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. And very well, my fairy fay. I'm going to Louisiana for to see Louisiana, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. Grasshopper on a railroad track, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. He's digging his teeth with a carpet tack, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. And very well, my fairy fay. I'm going to Louisiana for to see Louisiana, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. And very well, my fairy fay. I'm going to Louisiana for to see Louisiana, Polly Wolly Doodle all the day. Now, that song I just did, was written in the 1840s, and it was so popular during the 20th century. I don't know what to do with it. It was so popular, it was in 2 Frank Capra movies during the golden age of Hollywood, and many other movies. If you walked into a Western, it would be unusual as the sheriff walks through those swinging doors into the saloon that the guy on the piano isn't singing that song, isn't playing that song. It was very popular, and it's been sung by people as varied as Clark Gable, Julie Andrews, and that great songster, Woody Woodpecker. And Shirley Temple. Oh, God bless you for knowing that. Now, this next couple songs were by Stephen Foster. And this one is considered by many to be his masterpiece. It's called Beautiful Dreamer. Stephen Foster had a rough life. I do a presentation, an hour of the Stephen Foster music, and he was a genius in his time. But he was the first guy through the door, always has the toughest ride. And he did. He was the first composer of American music that's what he did for a living. He was not a performer. He would perform at some private things, but he was not a performer. He made money at nothing other than writing music. And when he started having his first big hit, he was hot for 5 or 6 years. Oh Susanna, 700,000 copies. He made $100. It's an indication of what his career was like. In his whole career, he died in 1864, born in 1826, died in 1864. He made a total of $15,000. Now, I know $15,000 was more in those days. There wasn't that much more. He was constantly poor. He was an alcoholic. He had one child, and he and his wife, who I think really kind of loved each other, all they kept doing was separating. And she didn't even see him the last 2 years of his life. He was living in New York City, thinking that's where he needed to be. I thought at first that was because of music, but I think it's because they had more liquor stores. That's all he did. He died in 1826, the greatest American songwriter of the 19th century, with $37 in his pocket, 37 cents in his pocket, and he was 37 years old. He was so beaten down by the way he treated himself that he fell, cut his head on a dresser, knocked unconscious. They found him, took him to the hospital, looked like he was going to die, and he didn't. He didn't die. He came to, and he had a partner a guy that he partnered with for a little while who wrote lyrics, and Foster would write the music, was checking in on him. His brother checked in on him. He's sitting up, he's eating soup, and 15 minutes later it went, and he was gone. A very sad life. And but this was his great song, I think. Written in 1862, and his publishers did not put it out. What they were hoping he would do is sell it to them, which is a mistake he made all the time. He would sell a song that would be a classic, Camptown Races, a lot of songs that sold a lot of sheet music. And he would get desperate for money, and he would sell something for $25, $50, that made thousands. And they were trying to get him to sell the song. He says, no, this song is going to be big. Well, it was 1862, it's the middle of the war. No one really cares. And finally they put it out in 1864, some months after he died, and said this was the last song that he wrote. It wasn't true, but they hoped it would build sales. It did not. The song was not popular till the 20th century, and it's a classic tune. Now everybody knows this tune. It was in many, many movies and sung. Oh gosh, it was recorded by many, many recording artists of the 20th century.
Beautiful dreamer, wake up to me. Starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee. Sounds of the rude world heard in the day, touched by the moonlight, they all pass away. Beautiful dreamer, queen of my song, list while I woo thee with soft melody. Then shall the clouds of sorrow depart. Beautiful dreamer, awake unto me. Beautiful dreamer, awake unto me. Beautiful dreamer,
another this is another Stephen Foster song, and it was actually a very important song for its time. In July 1st, 1862, after a year of fighting, it became clear in the North that they had to take the gloves off and pretend that this wasn't a war that was just going to last a couple of months. They weren't doing well. The North was getting beaten in the big battles, incompetent generals and what have you. But he said, so he started calling for 300,000 recruits to come and join and save the Union. Now, people were still filled with patriotism. That would fade as the hundreds of thousands of casualties would float in, and people's and children's sons would appear in the newspaper as the fallen. So they called for 300,000. Well, this electrified the North, as you can well imagine, and there was a gentleman by the name of John Sloan Gibbons. Gibbons was a poet. He started banks. He was a jack of all trades. He was brought up in a Quaker family in Maryland, in Delaware. And as he grew up, he moved to Philadelphia. He got married into another Quaker family. And like his family, they were staunch abolitionists. Staunch. So much so that his father-in-law, and then James joined him. While Pennsylvania was a free state, that didn't mean that it wasn't legal for slave catchers to come into the state and reclaim their master's property and grab some free blacks while he was at it. So Gibbons' father-in-law convinced some of these people otherwise at the point of the gun. Well, they were both tossed out of the Quaker community. They still went to meetings, but they were no longer officially Quakers. In 1833, they moved out to New York, and he set up shop, started two banks. He wrote a huge volume on how you did this. He's a very accomplished guy. But he never stopped writing abolitionist tracts, which would be shown in all the abolitionist newspapers of the time. He had a home on 27th Street in Manhattan. And when this happened, he and his wife, though they're Quakers and supposedly not violent, they were jubilant because they felt, even though the government wasn't saying this, they felt this is going to mean the end of slavery. And they were on board. So he immediately, this is July 1st that this declaration went out. In the next 2 weeks, he wrote this this poem, "We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more." And it electrified the North. And besides electrifying the North, it electrified composers. Many of the popular composers of the time, including George Root, who we just talked about, would write music to this prose, and it became popular. One of them, of course, was Stephen Foster. His was not the most popular because he was with some two-bit publisher, and it didn't get publicized. But I picked it because it's my favorite one. I like the melody. It sounds a little bit more modern. And this is "We're Coming, Father Abraham."
We are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. We are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. From Mississippi's winding stream, from Virginia's shore, we raise our homes and workshops, our wives and children dear, our hearts too filled for utterance, and but a single tear. We dare not look by behind us, but steadfastly before. We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. We're coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more, and we are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. If you looked across the valleys where the golden harvest shines, you'll see our sturdy farmer boys forming into lines, and children at their mother's knees learning how to read, tearing at wheat for wool against their country's need, and a tearing our bucks and sweeping at every standing house. We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. We are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more, and we are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. If you look across the treetops that meet the northern sky, on moving lines of rising dust, our visions to the sky, and down the Lord from the flag. And quickly the winged hearts below blows the flag, rising up and down beneath your sweeping flag. And our bayonets they stand beacon at every cannon roar. We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more, and we are coming, our union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more, and we are coming, our union to restore. We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more.
Now this next song, it always interested me. There were a lot of all Irish regiments fighting in the north, 180,000 Irish immigrants and first generation born fighting for this union. And I got interested in it because my family's Irish on all sides. And my great-great-great-grandfather, now listen to this name, Fergus O'Hearn, came over, Irish enough for you, came over from Dublin, got married in 1841, Mary Ann Murphy. They had a bunch of kids. And then things weren't going well in Ireland. It was one of the most horrible places to live at that time, destitute. And in 1848, they came to the United States. They landed in Brooklyn, and they became, for the first time, they were prosperous. They were happy and prosperous. Then the war came, and he was recruited to an all-Irish regiment called the Irish Rifles out of New York City. And he left his wife and 5 children at the age of 42. And a lot of them did that. And why would they do that? They did that because there were multiple reasons, but the big one was they felt they owed it to their country. They were treated horribly in Ireland. And here, while there was a lot of discrimination against Catholics and Irish and immigrants, there was still lots of opportunity. And if you stuck to it, like him, you were able to find your way. So he's sailing away down south, and he had to be saying to himself, I'm going to get killed one way or the other. The Confederates are going to kill me, or when I get back, my wife is going to kill me for leaving her with 5 kids. But he survived the war. He came back, and there are some records that show that he became a lawyer. That they were a little murky. I don't know if that's true. But he ended up with 6 children and a success story. And my family's still here as a result. But I wondered, how could those people that were Irish living in the South, how could they fight for a government fighting to save slavery? Of course, there's a lot more to it. It's not that simple. There's a lot more to it than that. And they saw it that way, and not the least of which was that's where they lived. They were fighting for their home. And anyway, it would be interesting when Confederates would be captured by an Irish regiment, and there was no love lost. How could you fight? They would yell at the northern guys, how could you fight for a dictator? That's just what we left. That's just what we left in England. Well, how could you fight for the slave? That sort of thing would go on. But there were less of them. There were 20,000, and they fought for the South. And there were a bunch of regiments, heavily Irish, but there was only one that was official, and it was the 10th Tennessee, the Sons of Erin, in Nashville, 1861. They formed up a regiment. It was a hard luck regiment. They had a lot of losses. And finally, the leader of this group was Colonel McCavick from Nashville, Irish, highly respected by his friends and his soldiers. He was a big shot. His family was very rich. His father was in the government, working for the Secretary of Defense at one point. Mayor of Nashville. McCavick was mayor of Nashville. But in 1862, they were in Raymond, Mississippi, and they were obliterated by the Yankees in that battle. And McCavick is dying on the field. And he says, well, we'll cut it off at that point. This song, every year my group would go up to the Catskills to play in this event. And every year we would go up, I would write a song. And I wrote a song about this 10th Tennessee, the Sons of Erin. And I did a lot of research on them, and I even listed guys from the regiment and the counties they were from. So it meant something to me. So I sang it. I've sang it a bunch of times over the years. And one of these days, because being in Civil War music and Irish stuff, people are always giving me books. And one gave me a book, a pamphlet really, Irish regiments in the Civil War, and it even had the Confederate ones. And there on page 38 was the 10th Tennessee. We'll get back to this, back to the story. One of the guys that I listed was a guy named Patrick Griffin. It was just a name to me, I didn't know nothing about it. But I find on this page 38, they told the story of McCavick dying. He died in the arms of Captain Patrick Griffin, 18 years old. And there's Patrick Griffin's picture. Now, you people who are interested in history are probably the only people who are going to get that chill up your spine. When, it's like walking at Mount Vernon, right? George Washington walked here. This was a real person. And, anyway, McCavick, as he was dying, said, please take care of me. Meaning, I'm going to die, but don't put me in a mass grave. Make sure that I'm in a place that my family can come and get me. He promised he would, Captain Patrick Griffin. And then he skedaddled and promised he would come back later. No, McCavick died. He came back to get the body, and he got tapped on the shoulder. It was a Union, a guy named Drury. He was a captain. He was an Irishman. What are you doing, son? And he told him why he was there. As it turned out, Drury and Griffin and McCavick were all from the same county. Their families were all from the same county in Ireland. And Drury cut him a break. He felt sorry for him. He says, okay. He got a bunch of prisoners and a wagon, and they did a funeral procession for him, buried him in a conspicuous place with a marker so his family could.
Wow.
And this is the Sons of Erin, 10th Tennessee. It was a glorious July, 61. There were men from Maryland to answer the call to fight for Tennessee and their land. And the man of courage was theirs to lead, to fight, to die, and to bleed. Colonel McCavick from Ireland. Up in the heather and down in the dell, chase them blue coats all around. A gallant heart waving in the breeze. Drums and the flutes and the cannons fly. Tell them when our
sons are there and always ready to go. Up in the heather and down in the dell, chase them blue coats all to hell. I'm down at heart, waving in the breeze. Drums and the flutes and the cannons fly, tell them when I'm far behind, when it's sung to them, Tennessee. Now it happened too soon for the brave, it's true. Our numbers were nearly cutting me too. Raining Mississippi, lost our heart and soul. Our dear boy mechanic who led the field, he was shot down with a rifle squeal. Gone to the angels where the heroes go. Up in the heather and down in the dell, chase them blue coats on the hell. I'm gallant heart, waving in the breeze. Drums and flutes, cannons cry, tell them we're not far behind, when it's time for them, Tennessee. We're sons of them, Tennessee.
This next one was an extremely popular tune, written by a man named William Clay Work, a gentleman from New England. And it's called Marching Through Georgia, and it commemorates the March through Georgia, the March to the Sea with Sherman. Sherman was obviously, this song became so incredibly popular, and it was written at the end of the war, 1864. He became associated with this song, and he was a very popular man. And he was in elected office, he was this and that, he was a tremendous celebrity. And every time he appeared, the band would play Marching Through Georgia. And Sherman hated this song. He was so tired of it. He finally died. It was what was played at his funeral. This, interesting is how sometimes comments collide. This work is from New England. He ends up in Chicago, and he is working for a printer, so he's just a working man. But he's writing songs on the side, and he was brilliant. He was a very popular, very successful songwriter later on. So he wrote this song, The Year of Jubilo, which is a brilliant piece of music. And he brought it up to Root and Katie Publishing, George Root, the same writer as the songs I had mentioned before, except Root had a publishing company, so he made money. He came in and he's dressed roughly like a working man, and he throws the sheet music on the desk of Root, and I guess Root played it on the piano, and he said, "Son, would you like to be a composer? Would you like to do that as a living?" He says, "Yes, sir." He says, "If you have more like this, we are going to have a very profitable future together." And they did. He made a lot of money, had a very successful life. Unlike, it's all about timing, right? Unlike Stephen Foster, who was better than them all, but he was the first one through the door. He had a career in an industry that didn't exist, and that was his problem. But it did now. Now you could have 700,000 or 1 million copies of something. But this is Marching Through Georgia. One other thing. When you're good, people copy you. And Marching Through Georgia, the melody caught on. It was borrowed by the British, by the Liberal Party, and by the Army. Changed the words to Marching on Pretoria. And my favorite is the Japanese loved this song. And in the Russo-Japanese War, which is the early 1900s, it was sung, and it was called Tokyo Kubi Bashi. Everyone together, Tokyo Kubi. And I'm going to learn the words to it one of these days. But
bring the good old bugle boys, we'll play another song. Sing it with a spirit that'll last the whole world long. Sing it like we we used to sing it 50,000 strong while we're marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that set us free. So we take our spirit out into the sea while we're marching through Georgia. Sherman's dashing Yankee boys, they'll never reach the coast. So the rebels said 'twas just an idle boast. Had they not forgotten to reckon with the host while we're marching through Georgia? Hurrah, hurrah, we'll bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that set us free. So we sing the chorus, Atlanta to the sea, while we're marching through Georgia. Yes, we covered the thoroughfare for freedom and its train. 60 miles of latitude, 300 in the main. Treachery went before us, distance was in vain, while we're marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we'll bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that set us free. So we sing the chorus, Atlanta to the sea, while we're marching through Georgia.
I don't want to keep people here all night. What time is it?
15 minutes.
Okay. We can just hang on to that. Unless, of course, I need it. No, I don't need it. This next song was one of the anthems of the South, and people, it really hasn't come forward. People really don't know this unless you're a history person. It's called the Bonnie Blue Flag. And it was one of the anthems. People think of Dixie as the anthem. This was very much as big as Dixie. It was written by an Irishman, Harry McCarthy, who's from Northern Ireland, and he emigrated to the United States in the late 50s, or in the 50s, to Arkansas of all places, because he was a musician, singer, songwriter, comedian, and he saw a future for him, for himself on the minstrel circuit, the blackface minstrel circuit. I guess he did okay, but he was kind of a gadfly. You know, he was over here and he was doing okay, but I guess he wasn't really very well liked. Well, the war started, and he wrote this song. The music is an old Irish tune, the Irish jaunting card. And this talks about, this song, the Bonnie Blue Flag, talks about the order in which the states left and, you know, patting themselves on the back. But it was very popular. And as the war's going on, things aren't going well. Even as they were winning victories on the battlefield, things were very hard at home. Inflation was through the roof. They were short of this, they were short of that. And Mr. McCarthy, he didn't appreciate it. He felt he should be treated better. And he was shooting his mouth off. He was in the Carolinas in a bar one night. And some of the people down there took him outside and beat the bejesus out of him. And they said he would be gone by the morning or they would finish the job. So he walked to Philadelphia. So I guess the Union wasn't so bad after all. So there he is, the guy who wrote this song. He's living in Philadelphia. But the song was tremendously popular in no place less than New Orleans, which was now under the control of the Union Army. And General Benjamin Butler, or as the people called him there, Beast Butler. I don't know how good he was on the battlefield. I've read some things, I don't think he was great. But I can tell you one thing for sure, he never read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Because the people there hated him. He was thin-skinned, he was constantly passing these ordinances that Lincoln was overturning. He wasn't there very long, maybe 9 months before they reassigned him. But in that time, he turned every citizen in New Orleans against him. Now, it's a tough job. You're an occupation force. But he just went at it hammer and tongue. And he hated this song, The Bonnie Blue Flag. And everybody was singing it, and probably everybody was singing it near him on purpose. Because that's how they got him back. So he went to A.E. Blackmore Publishing Company, who was really pumping out the music for the Bonnie Blue Flag. And he went in there, he broke all the equipment, he stole all the copies, he had them burned, and he had Mr. Blackmore thrown into jail. He was fined $500, which was a fortune in those days. And he passed an ordinance. Anybody playing it on an instrument, whistling it, singing it, would be arrested and fined $25. Well, they just about had it with this guy. So what the good women of New Orleans started taking to was, as a union officer would walk down the street, they would dump their basin. Yeah, that nice. They would dump their basin on them. Well, he's wild. He passes another ordinance. Any woman who does that is going to be arrested as a prostitute and put into jail. Well, these chamber pots were quite a weapon. So some entrepreneur took chamber pots and started selling them with perfect caricatures of Beast Butler in the bottom of it for them to aim for. We are a band of brothers, named to the sword, fighting for our property we earned by honest jaws. When those rights are threatened, the call goes near and far. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for brother rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. For as long as the Union was faithful to its trust, like friends and like family, kind were we and just. But soon Northern aggression attempts our rights to mar. So we raise our high the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Now Berkeley Gal in South Carolina, she nobly took the stand, and then came Alabama and took her by the hand, and quickly Mississippi and Georgia, Florida, all raised on high the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. And then came old Virginia, the old Dominion state, who lived by example, at last would share the fate. And by that example, the other states would join. We raise our high the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Now here's to our Confederacy, proud we are and brave, like patriots of old we fight our heritage to save. And rather than submit to pride we would prefer, so raise our high the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue Flag that bears a single star. We'll do one more song. By the way, did anybody ever see the movie Gods and Generals?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, remember when they sang that song that the guy's riding around
Yes.
with the flag?
Yes.
One of the musicians was a friend of mine. His name is David Kincaid. I don't know if you've ever heard of David Kincaid. I've shared the stage with him many. He's one of the great Irish historians and an amazing, he's from New York City, and an amazing composer and musician. He's just terrific. But he's in that movie. Okay, this last one is the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which of all these songs has probably got the most staying power. It's known by everybody. It's played at state funerals. Great tune. It started out as a Christian tune early in the 1800s. You know, down south where they used to have the tents, where the tents would be set up, the tent revivals, and they'd go from town to town. It started off as a Christian song down there. And eventually, as years went by, it was used in the Army as a marching song. And the song that it was called John Brown's Body. Now, not the John Brown's Body, believe it or not, there were two of those. This was the John Brown's Body that you don't know, and I don't know it either. It was a bunch of soldiers made up. There was a guy, he was an immigrant from Scotland, and he was the worst soldier you ever saw in your life. He could not, he didn't know the difference between his left and his right. He would fall, and believe it or not, he was in the cavalry, he would fall off, and terrible things. So he was a clown. So I don't even know those words, but that was the John Brown's Body, the first one. The second one was, of course, the great abolitionist John Brown, who took Harper's Ferry, the armory, and this is one of the precipitation of the Civil War, because while he holed up there, finally the American army came and grabbed him by Captain Robert E. Lee, that very same Robert E. Lee. He grabbed him, and that's where that song came from. Well, this woman, Julia Ward Howe from New York City, she was a poet, a playwright, a women's activist for women's suffrage, and an abolitionist. And she was a handful. And she married Mr. Howe, and he thought he was getting a 19th century woman. He wasn't. He was getting a 21st century woman. And they had a bunch of kids, I think they had 4, but they clashed constantly because he wanted her home. Not her. She's going to see a publisher. She's going to organize a rally. She's going to be in a rally. She's going to be in jail. There's all these things that she was. And I've seen pictures of her. She's a very pretty woman, and apparently she was brilliant and willful. Very strong woman. So her husband was connected with the Lincoln administration, and he became the head of the U.S. Sanitary Commission, or one of the people running the U.S. Sanitary Commission. They were living up in Boston, and they came in 1861, late in the year. The family came down to Washington so that her husband could inspect the camps. So she's there with her traveling group, probably maybe her children, some friends, and she's walking down the street, and here comes a Union regiment, and they are marching to the song, John Brown's Body. Words are a little rough. John Brown's body is a moldering in the grave, John Brown's body, like that. And her friend said to her, Julia, do you think you can put some proper words to that rousing melody? And she says, I'll try. And that very night, in her words, she woke up in the gray of early dawn when the wished-for words were assembling themselves in my mind. I lay there a while longer as the final verse came together, and then I felt, I have to write this down or I shall lose it. So I went to my writing desk. The pen flew across the paper without me hardly even looking at it. And then I went back to bed to sleep, but not before thinking that something remarkable had happened to me that night. So it had. It's an amazing song, and she had the chutzpah to get this out. So she wrote the words to a known melody, and she went to the Atlantic Monthly, which was a big deal back then. And in February, it was published. And she made all of $15. I'm telling you, songwriters get screwed. And it spread throughout the country. It would end up in newspapers. Newspapers were a little different back then. Not unusual to see short stories and poems and songs. Meanwhile, a gentleman named Charles McCabe was in Ohio. He was a clergyman, very talented man, gifted man, credible singer, mesmerizing speaker. He was Methodist. And so the Methodists, what they used to do is they would send him on the road to raise money. He was very good at it. But the war came, and he became a chaplain in the Ohio 121st. Well, in the course of time, there's a battle, and he is captured, and he ends up at the horrible Libby prison in Richmond. No prison's a good place. This one was especially bad. As you can imagine, the Confederates couldn't feed their own people. Certainly not going to feed or take care of people in their prisoners. So it's a very boring place, but it's a very depressing place. Very depressing. And one day, somebody slipped a newspaper from Philadelphia that had the words to Battle Hymn of the Republic, and on the bottom, sung to the tune of John Brown's Body, which everybody knew. So he memorized it and taught it to anyone who would listen. And this place was packed with people, and morale was as bad as it can be. In 1863, within a short period of time, the Union won 2 major battles, Vicksburg and Gettysburg. Now, of course, people in the prison don't know this, but they find out. And when the word came through, it is as if the roof came off the building. And McCabe had everyone screaming not John Brown's Body, Battle Hymn of the Republic. So, in the course of time, he is exchanged, and he goes about his work. He ends up in Washington at the U.S. Capitol for the United States Christian Committee. And the people in the audience are senators and congressmen and other dignitaries. And then slipping in the back was Abraham Lincoln. Now, you hear stories like this, and sometimes you can't believe them, because everything was Lincoln's favorite song. Now, there's like 7 or 8 songs that were Lincoln's favorite songs. People say these things. But as it turns out, Julia Ward Howe's daughter was there. And she explained what happened. Because McCabe was one of the speakers. And he came up and he told the mesmerizing stories of Libby Prison, the things that went on there. And then when they found out about the 2 victories, people were on the edge of their seats. And he ended his program, as he ended all of his programs, by singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. In Julia Ward Howe's daughter's words, the effect was magical. These highly patriotic, highly important people stood as one and shouted the words out. Now, they don't know how many verses they knew, but they sure knew Glory Hallelujah. And the place was electric. So finally, as he comes to the end of this very emotional rendition of the song, it's dying down, and in the back, Abraham Lincoln was heard to shout, "Sing it again." This is the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Truth is marching, 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 truth is marching on. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage when the grapes of wrath restored. He is come to strike and lightning with his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen it in the watchfire, 100 circling cats. He builded him an altar in the evening dews and downs, where the bread of righteous sends by the dim of flaring lamps, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting through the hearts of men beneath the very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Yes, any questions? Like, why didn't you stop singing earlier?
The song Gary Owen, is that Civil War?
Yes, it's an Irish tune.
Yeah.
It's an Irish tune, but yes, it's very popular. You see it a lot in John Wayne movies, but it was a very popular song in the Civil War.
Didn't Custer use it too?
Yes, it was the theme of his cavalry. Didn't do too well, though.
Didn't work for him.
Anybody else?
Well, excellent. All right, thank you
Nice
so much,
meeting you.
Don. Now, can we catch your musical act somewhere in Buffalo sometime soon, or?
Well, let's see. Where am I? They're mostly historical societies. It's on my website.
All right. Okay.
It's on my website. One of the things I'm doing that's in public, July 5th, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Alden, but they have a concert series. And July 5th, I'm appearing doing the music of the Civil War during the concert series from 7 to 9 on July 5th. And then the following week, I come back with my Irish band, and we sing Irish music on the 12th.
All right.
It's in that funny little town park.
July 12th.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a business card?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Do you have a business card?
Yes, I do. Right up there.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Good. Well,
Nice meeting you.
Oh, nice meeting you.
thanks so much.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
I know Ryan would, of course, have all the announcements, and he would say them without looking at any props. I only have one announcement that I want to get out, because Joey, Coffee with Joe E. on Thursday morning, we had moved it to Thursday afternoon for, is it David Riley was going to speak? That got canceled, so Ryan has stepped up, and we're going to be back this Thursday morning at 9 a.m., and he's going to be discussing 4 Genesee County folks that fought in the Civil War and their story behind that. So if you folks come to that, that would be great. Nice tie-in to the music tonight. Of course, everyone has to bring at least one other person, because we got a lot of donuts to eat, and a lot of coffee to drink. So, with that, I thank you all for coming out, and have a good evening. All right.